Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County Forum for candidates for Everett City Council Districts 1 and 2. I am your moderator, Jody Troutwine. I'm the outgoing Voter Services Chair of the Snohomish League of Women Voters. All the candidates for Everett City Council were invited to attend a forum. Candidates participating in this forum are Paul Roberts and Mary Fosse for District 1 and Paula Rhyne and Greg Lineberry for District 2. The candidates for Districts 3, 4, and 5 are participating in a different candidate forum. The League thanks all the candidates for running for office, for their willingness to serve the community if elected, and for participating in this forum. It's the policy of the League to be nonpartisan. Therefore, we neither endorse nor oppose candidates or parties. We do take positions on issues which we have studied and on which we have reached consensus. Let me briefly explain the question and answer period rules. Opening and closing questions have been sent ahead to the candidates. Other questions have not been shared. However, we have made each candidate aware of the issue areas this forum was likely to cover. And we thank the community members who sent us recommendations about local issues. I will pose the questions. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to respond, and then 90 seconds will be allowed for answers to the final question. And I will state that change clearly when we get there. We are using a countdown timer visible to all the candidates. It shows elapsed time and alerts candidates when there are 15 seconds left, when the time is up. Time limits on questions will be strictly enforced. When you see the timer turn red and hear the chime, you are done. I will change the starting order for each question, rotating through all the candidates to ensure a random and fair sequence. The order for the first question will start with Mr. Roberts, okay? And then we'll go through the others in order and rotate. The first question is, what qualifications and experience make you a strong candidate for this position?
Well, thanks to the League for putting on the forum. My background covers almost 5 decades of management in cities, public policy, both economics and environmental science is my academic background, and land use and environmental law as well. I am not a lawyer, but I do have years of experience in applying laws, both in terms of land use and environmental law, as a former planning director, former public works director, a former assistant city manager, and as a consultant to both private and public sector in public policy. So my background includes being the chief of staff to Congressman Norm Dix and also an advisor to Governor Gardner, building the Everett Navy base and working on land claim settlements.
Thank you. And I neglected to say what order I would next go to. So this first came to Mr. Roberts. It will next come to Ms. Fosse, then to Ms. Rhyne, and then to Mr. Lineberry. Okay, so Ms. Fosse, you are next. What qualifications and experiences make you a strong candidate for this position?
I have nearly 20 years of experience in business and public service, including many years as an operations manager, an employment specialist, serving on the Everett Public Schools Fiscal Advisory Council, as a commissioner on Everett's Districting Commission, and now as a legislative aide for State Representative Emily Wicks. In addition to being a dedicated community advocate and volunteer, many know me through my work as chair of the Delta Neighborhood Association, and as someone who gets things done. I'm also a mother, a wife of a veteran, an educator, a sexual assault survivor, and a small local business owner. And while my resume and my professional experience is relevant for this position, it's my lived experience in childhood poverty and in homelessness that gives me the perspective needed in this role, in addressing our housing and homelessness crises and understanding the nuance of those issues. And I stand ready to serve as a leader who will listen to all the neighbors in my district and who will bring fresh ideas and a new energy to the city government, and who's ready and able to lead Everett in addressing the issues affecting our community and capitalizing on opportunities that we have.
Thank you. All right, we move now to Ms. Rhyne with the same question. What qualifications and experience make you a strong candidate for this position?
Yeah, my name is Paula Rhyne, running for Everett City Council District 2. I have over 20 years of educational, professional, political, and volunteer experience. I'm a two-time graduate of the University of Washington, most recently with a master's from the Evans School of Public Affairs and Governance. I previously worked for King County Councilmember Bob Ferguson as a legislative intern and carried forward as Director of Constituent Relations with Councilmember Rod Dembowski. My past experience also includes working for the Affordable Housing Program at the Federal Home Loan Bank of Seattle and serving as board president of the University District Food Bank, where I oversaw a board of 12 to 16 people and an operating budget of $1 million. Currently, I work as the legislative aide for Snohomish County Councilmember Megan Dunn, and I've worked on policies benefiting working families, housing and homelessness measures, equity and social justice initiatives, bolstering human services and resources, and supporting our veterans, particularly those that are involved in the justice system. I'm also currently active in the Port Gardner Neighborhood Association and enjoy the hyper-local focus of neighborhood involvement.
Thank you. And now to you, Mr. Lineberry, same question. What qualifications and experience make you a strong candidate for this position?
Thank you. I've lived in Everett for most of my adult life, and I've worked serving our residents as a police officer for over 32 years. I just recently retired from the Everett Police Department as a captain in the Services Division. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I'm deeply involved in our community. I've served on the board of directors for Boys and Girls Clubs of Snohomish County, 2 years out of that time as board president. I've been in the Everett Rotary Club for over 18 years, and I'm currently in the club as club president. I also now serve on the board of directors for Domestic Violence Services of Snohomish County. I've served on the board of directors for Project Safe Neighborhoods. I was very involved with the initiative that created council districts in Everett. In fact, I wrote most of the language that our voters approved for our city charter related to districts. I have a home that I live in Port Gardner with my wife. We're very active in the local neighborhood and involved in solving a lot of local neighborhood issues. And I think I'm uniquely qualified for the position.
Thank you. All right, as we move to the next question, it'll be Ms. Fosse first, Ms. Rhyne second, Mr. Lineberry third, and Mr. Roberts fourth. And this is the question. What are the biggest challenges facing Everett and what are its greatest strengths? Ms. Fosse.
Thanks. Well, obviously our structural budget deficit, which has been ongoing for quite a while, the need for intentional housing or planning for the future, including our inevitable growth and climate change realities that are coming. Housing and homelessness crises, of course. We've been needing to build 1,500 units to meet our growth management targets set by the Puget Sound Regional Council. And our annual average has only been 231, and my neighbors and our crucial workforce are just being priced out of Everett right now. And it's really tragic that people increasingly are unable to live in the city. Greatest strengths, Everett has an amazing untapped potential that with some comprehensive long-term planning, I think we can harness for new revenue and more sustainable building and infrastructure. And we have an amazing skilled workforce, and supporting that pipeline, I'm sure we'll be able to show industries that Everett is the place to be and grow our tax base. And we also have really awesome neighbors.
Thank you. And now to you, Ms. Rhyne, the same question. What are the biggest challenges facing Everett and what are its greatest strengths?
The biggest challenges that Everett's facing right now is our inability to afford housing in the area. Our housing and homelessness issue is not just a crisis that's unique to Everett, but it's certainly one that we can tackle here on the local level. I was really supportive of the pallet shelters that went in over by the Union Gospel Mission and was really disappointed with the no sit, no lie ordinance that was passed in conjunction with it. I think that helping our homeless population get housed and have a safe, decent, affordable place to live so that the individual reasons that they're experiencing homelessness can be addressed will bolster the overall public safety and livability of our community as a whole. So I'd like to see better support services for people experiencing homelessness. With housing affordability, I'm supportive of the city's Rethink Housing Plan, and I really think that it's important that we work to address housing affordability in our region to make sure that our working class neighbors aren't overburdened by the cost of housing in our community.
Thank you. And we now move that question to Mr. Lineberry. What are the biggest challenges facing Everett and what are its greatest strengths?
Our biggest challenges are housing, and housing. I have never seen in the 30 years that I've lived in the community anything like what we're experiencing now with homelessness, with affordability of housing, with how the affordability of housing spills over and creates and involves homelessness. I have spoken to hundreds of our residents, and I hear that over and over again as their primary concern. And that leads to our biggest strengths. Our biggest strength is our community members. What I do hear from community is they want a compassionate solution. They want to help people out. Like me, they support the pallet shelter project, believe in what it's doing, but they also want people to be, held accountable. That we need to solve problems and offer people help, and if they're unwilling to take that help, we can't give up on our community and our sidewalks because of that. The other strength, I'll shout out to our city employees. They do a phenomenal job in the community and supporting our residents.
And now we move this question to Mr. Roberts. Thank you, Mr. Lineberry. Same question. What are the biggest challenges facing Everett, and what are its greatest strengths?
Well, we have a structural budget challenge, and we have a housing crisis. And there are really two parts to that. One is housing supply in the marketplace. The other is homelessness. They're related, but they're not the same. And we have a climate crisis. So those three crises are front and center for our city and for our region. The greatest strength, and it's been mentioned, is we have a tremendous, nimble population that's willing to step up and do really, really great things to address these problems. And so that's number one. Number two, we have the largest manufacturing base in the state of Washington. We have a tremendous job base. We have the third largest port. So we have a lot of capacity there. We are nimble. We are able to make decisions quick and move on those decisions. And so I'm proud to have been part of that. But I think the climate crisis is an example where we have led the region.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move to another question, but these issues of homelessness and environment will come back again a little bit later so we can get them in more detail. This will be first Ms. Rhyne, then Mr. Lineberry, then Mr. Roberts, then Ms. Fosse. And this one is, what are the issues, if any, in Everett arising from the pandemic? How would you address them if you believe such issues exist?
1 minute. All right. So there's a lot of issues that have come up in COVID. In particular, as it relates to District 2, I have a lot of concerns about our small businesses in the downtown core of Everett. They've been, particularly our restaurants and our coffee shops, have been impacted so severely from the back and forth shutdowns, mask mandates, folks staying home to stay healthy. And so finding ways that we can bolster our small businesses downtown and support them as we continue to wade through the economic impacts of COVID is something that's really important to me. I'd also like to highlight that the COVID has shined a bright light on the inequitable gaps in our system for access to healthcare. So there's many BIPOC community members that haven't had equal access to healthcare from COVID, and also with our BIPOC small business owners have also been disproportionately impacted by COVID. So helping to fill in those inequitable gaps is something that's really important to me.
Thank you. All right, and then same question then to Mr. Lineberry. What are the issues, if any, in Everett arising from the pandemic? How would you address them if you believe such issues exist?
Yeah, the primary impact has been on our businesses, and you don't have to go far to see that impact and look downtown and see the businesses that have been closed as a result of that. The folks that were working at those businesses that have lost their jobs and the impacts that has had on them. Everett needs to take a very strong stance in supporting our businesses and making the city as business friendly as possible. One of the things that I've done and continue to fight for in that regard is an amendment to an ordinance to allow employees to work from home, to have businesses out of their home. And that will be coming to City Council shortly, and hopefully it will get approved. The other impact is to students, and I think that needs to be underscored, the continuing impact that for our young folks that have been kept out of school, and the impact that has on their education and on their social development. And we need to continue to support them and support the Everett School District to make sure that impact is mitigated.
Okay, thank you so much. And now we'll move that question to Mr. Roberts. What are the issues, if any, in Everett arising from the pandemic? How would you address them if you believe such issues exist?
It has been mentioned, the housing costs are very real, and they are particularly hard for folks who are struggling with employment. Businesses have been struggling, and that has been mentioned. We also have healthcare and childcare issues. And if we're going to have a workforce that's going to be able to respond and recover, we're going to have to deal with the childcare issues as well. The education issues are important. And while the city doesn't have a direct role in education, you know, I'm a former school board member, and I'm quite sensitive to the issues that child care and child development that are critical at this time. So what can we do about that? We have some resources that should be focused on recovery, but I think supporting our healthcare workers and getting vaccinated is probably the number one thing, so we can get in front of this issue as opposed to running behind it.
Thank you so much. And now we move that question to Ms. Fosse. What are the issues, of any, in Everett arising from the pandemic? And how would you address them if you believe they exist?
Thank you. Well, one, there's obviously the economic side of things with small businesses struggling and shrinking revenue, workforce inequities exacerbated by the childcare deficiencies, housing instability, and incomes being outpaced by general cost of living. Our budget is, and what we invest in is indicative of what our values are. And I think that we need to invest in things that are vital to our community, especially housing and our social infrastructure. Two, the pandemic has exacerbated our public health system, from mental health to just pure access to healthcare. And from children and students to seniors, we need to support creative avenues to build community and strengthen resiliency, and actually addressing our mental health crisis will require bold, holistic actions that target root causes. And we can do that a little bit patchwork at the municipal level, but we have to look higher too for help.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, the next question, we'll do Mr. Lineberry first, then Mr. Roberts, then Ms. Fosse, then Ms. Rhyne. Okay, and this one, we've made some reference to homelessness and housing, but this one looks at this a little bit differently. So I'm going to go ahead and ask it is, what initiatives would you support to address homelessness, food insecurity, drug and alcohol abuse, and mental health issues? Starting with Mr. Lineberry.
Well, one of the things that I've supported already is the pallet shelter project. I've been on site at the location. I've talked to residents. That was limited to 20 units. It was designed for more than that, and I think that needs to be expanded. Everett Gospel Mission does a fantastic job down there, and we need to continue to support them. I'm a big believer in using Ricky's Law. I think a lot of the problems that we experience with homelessness and with addiction issues are because the cycle just continues over and over again. And Ricky's Law gives us a tool to get mandatory treatment for individuals and to try to break that cycle. We haven't used that tool here where it's been used in other places in the state. It's been very successful. And I think that we need to bring it here and try to, whenever we can, break that cycle, get people help for their addiction issues and give them stable housing like we're doing at Pallet Shelter, and then work to get them into permanent housing and help resolve the issues that they have that have led to those problems.
Okay, thank you. And moving right along, Mr. Roberts, this will come to you next. What initiatives would you support to address homelessness, food insecurity, drug and alcohol abuse, and mental health issues?
So I'm proud to say I have supported these initiatives, and I have been supportive of every single housing initiative that's come before the City Council. And before that, years before that, working with community development, planning and community development block grants for housing. I have been the liaison in support of the Pallet Shelter project, including now an additional 40 units. I will continue to work in that regard. But as we update our comprehensive plan, I think we will have some opportunities to address food and food insecurity as well. And I think therein lies some opportunities to bring together housing and food. If we're going to deal with the issues on our streets, we're going to have two infrastructure types. One is physical for housing, the other is the social services, and you have to have both in order to make those systems work properly. So I will continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And the same question to Ms. Fosse. What initiatives would you support to address homelessness, food insecurity, drug and alcohol abuse, and mental health issues?
Well, I think we need to recognize that it's more cost effective to prevent our neighbors from becoming homeless in the first place. But of course, I support the housing first policies like pallet shelter. They're pretty awesome, Everett-based company. Statistics show that housing stability is fundamental before tackling, other existing issues. And I do have a greater vision in mind that this time doesn't really allow for, but I would like to see kind of an assessment of our social infrastructure capacity and the layers needed and the current available resources, like how many spots are available for substance use disorder treatment for people with mental health issues. What are the waitlist times and the demographics of both our unhoused populations and people in need of treatment? Like how many single men with substance use disorder with judicial backgrounds and how many are pregnant women, et cetera. I think we need to bring all the voices to the table to assess the issue, including people with lived experience and those on the front line, existing treatment experts, firefighters, social workers, public defenders, and so forth.
Thank you very much. And finally, this question goes to Ms. Rhyne. What initiatives would you support to address homelessness, food insecurity, drug and alcohol abuse, and mental health issues?
As I mentioned, I'm really supportive of the pallet shelter project. Projects like that where there's established code of conducts, guidelines for being able to stay there, and then access to wraparound services to address a person's individual reason why they're experiencing homelessness is really effective to help people move up and off the streets. The gap that we're experiencing now, though, is that if a person receives a housing voucher, it's 8 or 9 years till they can move from a place like pallet shelter to permanent housing. So filling in that gap with affordable housing projects would be great. There's ways to provide tax incentives to affordable housing projects to have green roofs so that gardens could be grown on roofs, which helps with climate change and also helps with food insecurity for the people that are living in those facilities. And just other wraparound services too at different affordable housing, through affordable housing programs would be great that can address a person's substance use disorder if they're experiencing it, or mental health issues, and more diversion centers.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to say to the audience, it's hard to answer these questions in a minute. Thank them all when you're thinking about it. Okay, moving on to the next question, and this will go Mr. Roberts, then Ms. Fosse, then Ms. Rhyne, then Mr. Lineberry. And that is, what is your strategy for working productively with your council colleagues and members of the public whose ideas or life experiences are different from yours?
Well, that's a great question. I have a sort of an approach that I have used, and I feel it works pretty successfully. And it comes in part from being a trained mediator and negotiator. First job is listen. The first job is listen carefully to what's being told and to understand the passion that's being expressed and understand the issues and the interests. Issues are negotiable. Interests are pretty tough, meaning people come from a position, that's where they live, that's who they are, what are they trying to tell us? And then how do you track that and pull it into public policy and to listen to all those voices? So I work with my colleagues. I think my colleagues would tell you that I have a good track record working with them, whether we agree or not, but being able to listen and develop real opportunities. And I think we did that in pallet shelters. When we started, there was not unanimity. I played a major role in negotiating.
Thank you. All right, moving right along to Ms. Fosse, same question. What is your strategy for working productively with your council colleagues and members of the public whose ideas or life experiences are different from yours?
Thank you so much for actually asking this question. It's really important to pay attention to that in such a divisive environment that we've had of late. I come from a community advocacy background, and I love talking with my neighbors and hearing their concerns and priorities for the city. And sometimes I do encounter perspectives that differ from mine, but conflict doesn't have to be bad. Diverse opinions and perspectives can lead to innovation and, in the least, an educational opportunity. The biggest advantage in working in local government in positions like that is that it's nonpartisan seat, and we have the opportunity to heal divisions and actually build community. And it's important to maintain a respectful discourse, but we can achieve more by assuming positive intent and looking for shared purposes or goals, because we have more in common than that which divides us.
Okay, thank you. And moving right along to Ms. Rhyne, same question. What is your strategy for working productively with your council colleagues and members of the public whose ideas or life experiences are different from yours?
With my work as the Director of Constituent Relations for a King County Council member, and now as the only staff member for a Snohomish County Council member, I have a lot of experience working not just with public that has differing opinions and have passionate differing opinions, but also with coworkers that are on the other side of the aisle. And I take a page from the playbook of Ruth Bader Ginsburg to just keep it to talking about the issues and not making it personal. So I think that there's plenty of time in the day to talk through an issue and to find commonality and understand where a person's coming from and what their lived experience is that's contributing to their viewpoint. And then to also take an opportunity to share my side as well and see where we can find the common ground, or where we can respectfully disagree, but always just to keep it about the issue and not make it personal.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll move to Mr. Lineberry. Same question. What is your strategy for working productively with your council colleagues and members of the public whose ideas or life experiences are different from yours?
Well, I think it's the same thing that I've always done, that I've done for 32 years as a police officer. Councilmember Roberts hit the nail on the head. You've got to be able to listen and to understand and to gain understanding. You've got to be respectful. You got to be willing to compromise. And that's a thing that I think is often lost in our current perspective and situations. I've experienced this before, not just as a police officer, but with some of the local campaigns I've been involved in, with the proposal to create districts. And we had a lot of varying viewpoints among council members, among citizens. And what we did was a compromise. We took the information and created a compromise. And I think you absolutely have to be willing to do that. But you also have to be able to hold on to your values. I think my values match those of the residents of District 2 and the rest of the city. Strong value for public safety. I'm not willing to compromise on that. Work with others and come to common goals with it, but also maintain strength of values and character.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the next question, and it will be Ms. Fosse, Ms. Rhyne, Mr. Lineberry, and Mr. Roberts. And this is the question. What are the most pressing environmental issues Everett faces, and what would you propose to address them? Ms. Fosse first.
Thanks. For anyone who does not know, I've been a lifelong environmentalist, and that consciousness is kind of foundational to my approach in everything. Proven environmental record, 2019 Conservation Leader of the Year from the Snohomish County Conservation District, and led a grassroots campaign to secure that $5.5 million for my community for the lead and arsenic contamination issues in our soils. And I'm working on preserving North Everett's last remaining wetlands, while also hopefully turning into an educational space for kids right now. Housing density, I think, is a critical solution to both our housing crisis and climate crisis. Sprawling communities create larger carbon footprints and additional fiscal strain locally, which we don't need right now with our utilities and schools and transit. Dispersing housing out to the areas that are important ecologically is detrimental. So I think that we should be more mindful about that. And
And of course, we all have something else we could add in all of these. Number two, second, Ms. Rhyne, for this question, what are the most pressing environmental issues Everett faces, and what would you propose to address them?
Yeah, I'll focus just on District 2 in Everett. Well, first, I was planning on introducing a styrofoam ban, but the state legislature beat me to it. Right here in District 2, we have the Wood Creek Forest over in the Wood Creek neighborhood, and it's 92 acres, and it's the largest urban forest in Everett. and I'm committed to saving all 92 acres. I think it's critical for the health of the neighborhood and the hillside, and just to for the overall tree canopy in our area. As a housing advocate, I do see a large intersection with housing and incentivizing green housing so that the compounding impacts of a footprint of a large housing facility could be mitigated. And I'm also really supportive of the environmental aspects of the Everett Convergence property over by where the future light rail station is going to be. They're planning to reintroduce native plants and native bugs, and making sure that a lot of the concrete and asphalt that is there now will be replaced with more greenery.
Okay, thank you. And moving right along to Mr. Lineberry, and what are the most pressing environmental issues Everett faces, and what would you propose to address them?
It's climate change, and I think that the continuing carbon dump that we're putting into the environment is going to be a crisis for us. It is now, and it's just going to grow if not addressed. I think the strategies council needs to consider what the impact is of every decision they're making, whether that's improving the situation or making it worse. We need to look at what we're doing now to see what changes that we can make, moving to electric vehicles whenever possible, putting in more electric charging stations, becoming more efficient with our buildings so that we're not putting as great a load on our power demands that are in themselves driving climate change and putting more carbon into the atmosphere. Everything that we do needs to be focused on reducing our carbon footprint in the city and reversing the impacts that we're having on climate change.
Thank you very much. We're going to get a ding here in a minute because he gave us a few seconds, but we're moving on to Mr. Roberts. What are the most pressing environmental issues Everett faces, and what would you propose to address them?
Well, the most pressing issue is climate change. I'll come back to that. My career spans decades administering state and federal environmental law under the State Environmental Policy Act, Shoreline Management Act, National Environmental Policy Act, and so forth. I led the efforts on the behalf of the city that dealt with the Sarco cleanup. I have been involved in 30 years in every single environmental issue in this city, and I have either been the leader or a major player in it. But in climate change, the issue is bigger. I chair the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency Board, and this issue is critical. It is hard to overstate it, but regions are where success will be found on the climate issues. And what we do in the Puget Sound region is exportable to the whole world. We need to decarbonize transportation as quickly as possible, and we need to, what I call, hit climate stopping distance, hit the brakes as hard as we can. We have very little time.
Thank you so much. So moving to the next question, it'll be Ms. Rhyne, then Mr. Lineberry, then Mr. Roberts and Ms. Fosse. And this is, what should be Everett's plan to deal with existing or potential racial inequities? Ms. Rhyne will be first.
Yeah, after the murder of George Floyd last year, there was a lot of work that the city started to address racial inequities in the area. And one of the positions that they created was I believe it's the racial equity director. And one of the projects that they're working on that I'm very excited about is the race and equity tool. So it's a toolkit that the city council can utilize, which will essentially create a checklist so that any policy that's brought in front of council will go through the checklist to make sure that that policy does not disproportionately impact communities of color. And if it does, red flag it, table it, let's bring people around and figure out ways that it won't disproportionately impact our communities. It's time that Everett does a better job of bringing communities of color to the table during decision-making processes. I firmly believe in no decisions about us without us, and we need to have more of our BIPOC community members at the table during decision-making processes.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll move to Mr. Roberts on this one. Oh, excuse me, to Mr. Lineberry, jumped over you. And the question is, what should be Everett's plan to deal with existing or potential racial inequities?
Yeah, thank you. I'm a big believer in trying to find the root of problems and getting down to the root of the problem and really addressing the issue. And while certainly addressing policy is important and needs to be done, but I think that we need to look as to why do those inequities exist. And I think very often, we talk about the difference in healthcare. the difference in maternity care, the difference in child nutrition, the difference in educational opportunities, the difference in living in a safe and supportive community. Where do people grow up at, and young people in particular? The difference in opportunities for employment and for equal employment, the difference between advancing in employment and having job opportunities, housing opportunities. We need to start from square one and say, what do we need to do better so that everybody has the same opportunity to grow as a child, to have the same education, so that then they are on the same equal footing later on in life.
Thank you. And now to Mr. Roberts on this question. What should be Everett's plans to deal with existing or potential racial inequities?
Well, in 2013, I sponsored the ordinance that created the Diversity Advisory Committee. And that is a place, and it really speaks to the issue that we need to address, which is making sure everyone has a voice and that voice is heard. And so the racial profile, if you will, the distribution of non-white people in Everett is really an interesting one, and it cuts across several racial groups. And it also includes groups that do not speak English. And so also one of the issues that I worked on is making sure that our police were not enforcing federal law insofar as ICE is concerned. So police reform, environmental justice, listening to the community, creating those opportunities for the community to come forward, and safe community opportunities is what we need to be addressing. And I think we're doing an okay job with that.
Okay, thank you. And now Ms. Fosse on this question. What should be Everett's plan to deal with existing or potential racial inequities?
Thanks. First off, diversity makes us stronger. Racial equity tools do help with that much needed equity lens in our policy. Coming from a community advocacy and neighborhood leadership background, neighborhood that is one of the most diverse in Everett, deconcentrating poverty as well as civic and community engagement has been a high priority. I've worked hard in Delta to make civic participation more accessible and implement more equitable outreach practices, meeting people where they are, and we've had great success. I'm well aware of the city's need for making civic engagement more accessible and meeting people where they are, so we will be better for it. I will be proud to advocate for things like continued remote access, childcare, greater website accessibility, increased public dissemination of city's current topics, and broader outreach, meeting people where they're at, and through community and cultural entities that they actually trust. That's really important to implement that and see everything kind of through equity lens and doing that.
Thank you very much. All right, moving on to the next question, and this will be Mr. Lineberry, Mr. Roberts, Ms. Fosse, Ms. Rhyne. And first of all, Mr. Lineberry, what is one aspect of public safety which you think could be improved in Everett to increase effectiveness and equity?
I think our police department does a phenomenal job, and I think that we've taken huge steps to improve equity. Councilmember Roberts mentioned the policy that we had to eliminate participating or cooperating with ICE, and that was actually a policy I wrote for our police department. I think that continued use of data-driven police department, more neighborhood policing, more involvement with our local neighborhoods are all things that we can do. I think we really need to look at what the issues are in our community and listen to the individuals. I hear about traffic complaints over and over again, and the safety that's involved with those. And so making sure that we're being responsive to those and enacting policies that help to resolve those community issues. Really listening to the residents and what are their issues and focusing on those and investing our resources there.
Thank you. All right, and moving on to Mr. Roberts on this question. What's one aspect of public safety which you think could be improved in Everett to increase effectiveness and equity?
There we go. Got to hit the mute button. I guess it's hard to say just one, but I think empowering the local community is critical. And I think the value of districts, and I know Greg Lineberry spoke to this as well. I mean, bringing together the community in the districts, I think really helps enhance and address those specific problems. As we look at the comp plan, it gives us an opportunity to look at issues such as transit and housing together, moving people together, dealing with their public safety issues, and giving them and empowering them to play a greater role and connect with the city in a more direct way. I think there are real opportunities there, and I think we need to use the GMA Comprehensive Plan Update as a tool to help open those doors and have better communication in our communities.
Okay, thank you. And now this question to Ms. Fosse. What is one aspect of public safety which you think could be improved in Everett to increase effectiveness and equity?
A little difficulty unmuting. Yeah, so our role as policymakers, it means we advocate that our first responders have the tools and resources to do their job. That said, we can reevaluate how we look at things like training and deployment and recruitment. I think our training and recruitment, we could have a greater focus on trauma-informed approaches and social work, and our recruitment efforts could be more based on our force being more reflective of the communities they serve. I know we have a really especially low incidence of female officers, and that is one avenue that statistically they found helps with de-escalation. Another thing we can look at is our deployment and how we actually deploy our officers and where they might be being stretched thin, that maybe we can look at, some of those minor things going out to other agencies.
Okay, thank you so much. So we now move to the last question of the forum. This is the one that we said you would have 90 seconds to answer. And the question is, what additional issues or information would you like to bring to the attention of the community? And our order will be Mr. Roberts, Ms. Fosse, Ms. Rhyne, and Mr. Lineberry. So, Mr. Roberts, your turn.
Well, thank you. In the next 4 years, the next 48 months, we will be making decisions that will affect and set the tone for the next decade, for the next 2 decades, for the next generation. And so the work that we do, whether it's focused on the GMA Comp Plan Update, which gives us an opportunity to bring together the community, or whether it's dealing with the climate change issues, we will have the opportunity to set that tone. We will have to deal with higher density. We will have to deal with connecting transportation and that higher density. We will have to deal with transit-oriented development, and we will have to deal with climate change. And what we've experienced in the last few years should help us understand that. I work with the Association of Washington Cities, helping advise cities throughout the state on climate change. And I will tell you that our ability to deal with those issues and build the infrastructure we need will challenge us in ways that we're only now beginning to imagine, whether it's managing water, whether it's managing fires, whether it's managing climate-influenced events, whether it's managing food supply. All of those issues will be in play. And public safety is a big part of that. Without it, we're in trouble. So it's housing, it's climate change, and it's the next it's what we do in the next 48 months will set the stage for the next 2 decades.
Okay, thank you. And now to you, Ms. Fosse. What additional issues or information would you like to bring to the attention of the community?
Thank you. Well, I think I'd like to emphasize the importance of our new district elections for Everett. For too long, our city council has not been truly representative of the residents of this city. And with districts, the people in Everett voted for change and to hear more diverse perspectives over the traditional ones that we've had. And now deep pockets are no longer a requisite to win, and people have choices beyond the status quo. And my neighbors, just like each of these districts, deserve someone that not only cares about Everett's, but knows the needs of their particular district and will proactively advocate for their communities. A candidate like myself that comes from a disadvantaged background and has a strong history of local community investment is a direct result of districts. This council may even have a female majority for the first time in our history. As a neighborhood chair, I became an innovative problem solver that gets things done, like the founding and securing funding for the Delta Kids program during the pandemic and securing millions to address the lead and arsenic contamination plaguing my community. And that's the kind of leadership we need. I'm running for Everett City Council because it's time for a fresh perspective and new ideas to address our perpetual budget deficit, housing and homelessness crises, and improve public safety and plan an economic recovery for all of our residents.
Thank you. And to you, Ms. Rhyne, the 90 seconds for what additional issues or information would you like to bring to the attention of the community?
Before I start, I didn't get a chance to answer the public safety question. If you wanted me to do
I
that.
was wondering about that. So timer, would you hold off just a minute? Which one would you rather do first?
Moderator's choice. Go ahead.
Okay, well, what if you go ahead and answer the 90 seconds here with additional issues, and then take a breath. We'll get that from Mr. Lineberry, and then we'll come back to you. So you get a breath in between. Is that okay? My apologies.
No worries.
Okay, timer, 90 seconds on these two, and then we'll come back and give her a chance. My apologies.
That's just fine. Thank you so much. I'm running because it's important to me that Everett is safe, vibrant, and affordable, and a great place for all of our families to grow and thrive. I echo Ms. Fosse's comments about districts and how it's a really amazing opportunity for folks like me to get in the race to represent my neighbors and my community. When I've been out doorbelling, I've been hearing from folks that I've been hearing a lot from folks that they've had enough with the status quo, enough with the same old, enough with the stale approach to our city's livelihood. And the voters echo that when they passed districts. And it was a very loud and clear message that it was time for something new. That said, the passing of districts is reflective of our community's desire for council leadership that is responsive, inclusive, proactive, and more in tune with our working families' daily struggles, and more representative of our city's demographics. And I am that candidate in this race. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving that question then to Mr. Lineberry, and we will come back to you, I promise. And that question is, what additional issues or information would you like to bring to the attention of the community?
Well, I want people to know that I'm running for office because we're at such a critical time in our community. We're in a financial crisis. It impacts our ability to help our neighbors and impacts the services we enjoy in the community. We've seen significant cutbacks to our parks programs and other city services that make Everett such a fantastic place to live and work. Our businesses, residents, and students continue to suffer through the pandemic and economic impacts from that. There are places in our city that our residents don't feel safe. We have massage parlors operating in our city again. There's a climate crisis that will have grave impacts on our community. And there's clearly a housing crisis, as evidenced by the tent communities on our District 2 sidewalks. I know I share the same values as the residents of District 2 and the rest of Everett. We want these issues addressed, and we want change. I have the background, experience, and proven ability to help our city council solve these problems and get Everett back on track. I'd like to underscore my endorsements because I believe they demonstrate the trust others have in my ability to serve our community and residents. I have the sole endorsement from former Mayor Ed Hansen, Mayor Pete Kinch, and Mayor Frank Anderson. I have the sole endorsement from Everett Council members Judy Toohey, Brenda Stonecipher, Jeff Moore, and Scott Murphy. I have the sole endorsements from all the city employee unions, the Everett City's employees represented by AFSCME, the Everett Firefighters Union, the Everett Transit Union Employees Union, the Everett Police Officers Association, and the Everett Police Management Union. I have the sole endorsement from Tulalip Tribes, 38th District Democrats, 21st Democrats, Affordable Housing Council. It's a critical time in our community, and I believe that District 2 residents will entrust me to serve them as the Everett Council member.
Thank you so much on that. Okay, so my apologies again, Ms. Rhyne. Timer, we would give her 60 seconds on this next question, and I'll read it again since it's been a little while since we did it. This is, what is one aspect of public safety which you think could be improved in Everett to increase effectiveness and equity? Thank you.
You bet. So I see public safety as a time spectrum. So there's early intervention, there's the time when a person interacts with a police officer, and then there's also a potential post-incarceration. So making sure there's early learning opportunities, anti-bias training, de-escalation training if a person's interacting with a police officer, and then also access to programs that reduce recidivism rates on the other end. And I'd like to focus on the early learning portion of events, particularly as it relates to the city of Everett. The city of Everett has the Forest Park Preschool. My little one, she went through it when she was about 2.5, 3 years old, and it was a very affordable and a fabulous place for my child to access early learning opportunities that set her on a trajectory towards success. And further funding to help with other early learning opportunities will help with increasing equity and equity towards successful opportunities for children in our community.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we've come to the end of this forum. I want to thank all these candidates for joining us. As I said before, giving an answer in a minute or even a minute and a half is really hard, and they really rose to that. So thank you so, so much for doing it. I wish I lived in Everett and I could vote. I don't. I live in the county. Anyway, I hope the community will help us thank these candidates for joining us and for running for office. A recording of this forum and others will be available on the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County website and YouTube channel. And you would find the links at our website, which is LWV, League of Women Voters, Snoho, not Snohomish, just snoho.org. But you could just Google League of Women Voters of Snohomish County and you will find it. We encourage all of you to explore additional information about these candidates and all others. The Snohomish County voter pamphlet will be mailed to residences starting October 13th. Vote411.org is sponsored by the League of Women Voters, and it's another good source for nonpartisan voting information. General election ballots will be mailed on October 14th, and Election Day is November 2nd. Please vote. This concludes our candidate forum again, and thank you all for joining us.